Welcome, everyone, to the Empowered Cities webinar, celebrating the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, New Ideas, New Partnerships, and New Pathways. My name is Al Miliato. I'm the project coordinator for Empowered Cities, and I'm just going to take you through a few housekeeping slides here to make sure nobody has any difficulty logging in or hearing the presentation correctly. Listening to the webinar. The audio for today's meeting can be accessed using computer audio or by calling in by phone. If you select computer audio, please make sure your speakers are turned on or headphones are plugged in. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer or prefer to listen by phone, you can dial in to 1-929-205-6099. The meeting code is 579-253-747. Captioning. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found by clicking the CC button in your Zoom controls at the bottom of the screen. If you do not see the captions after clicking the button, you can alert me via the chat box, and you can also view the captions in your browser at the address on the screen, which is www.streamtext.net/player?event=NDI. This link will also allow you to change font size and other preferences with captions. Submitting questions. Please use the Q&A box to submit any questions you have during the webinar, and we will direct them accordingly. If your question is not answered during the webinar, or you're listening by phone and not logged in, you can email me directly, and my email address is amilioto@ndi-inc.org. Technical assistance. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please again, feel free to use the chat box, send a message to me, or you can email me. And again, my email is amilioto@ndi-inc.org. Please note the webinar is being recorded and the materials will be placed on the National Disability Institute website at www.nationaldisabilityinstitute.org/resources/empowered-cities-webinars. And with that, I will turn things over to Michael Rausch.
Thank you, Al, and good afternoon to all of you. My name is Michael Rausch, and I'm the director of the Real Economic Impact Network and a part of the Empowered Cities team here at National Disability Institute. We're excited for our discussion this afternoon to celebrate the 29th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, to look at new ideas, new partnerships, and new pathways to equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for people with disabilities. This afternoon, we're going to provide an overview of Empowered Cities. We're going to highlight the promise of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We're going to look at the financial status of people with disabilities, and then have a panel discussion with our distinguished guests today. Next slide, please. To get things started, I would like to share with you some information on National Disability Institute in case you are new to our organization. National Disability Institute is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to building a better economic future for people with disabilities. National Disability Institute is the first national organization committed exclusively to championing economic empowerment, financial education, asset development, and financial stability for all persons with disabilities. At the National Disability Institute, we affect change through public education, policy development, training, technical assistance, and innovative initiatives like Empowered Cities. National Disability Institute envisions a society where people with disabilities have the same opportunities to achieve financial stability and independence as people without disabilities. To learn more about the National Disability Institute, go to www.nationaldisabilityinstitute.org. We're thankful for the support and collaboration with Citi Community Development for the Empowered Cities Initiative. I'd like to introduce Jasmine Thomas, Senior Vice President of National Initiatives from Citi Community Development, to say a few words. Jasmine, welcome.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I'm glad to join the call and so grateful for the partnership with NDI, as well as with the team to really understand and talk about the important role of what it means to be intentional and inclusive in by strategy and design. Next slide, please. At Citi Community Development, we lead Citi's commitment to financial inclusion and empowerment for low-income people and individuals across the country. And this relationship with NDI really is a flagship for us that leads us into a national dialogue in partnership with municipal leaders to talk about the role that financial inclusion plays in supporting and in strengthening the inclusion opportunities and supports necessary to help people with disabilities and their families thrive. We are principally responsible for leading nonprofit partnerships and are often the face of city and communities. And we bring what we believe to be important expertise to the relationship, as well as a community lens that allows us to really partner with trusted intermediaries and experts to think how we can be more available, but also add a unique value to the community. And we saw this opportunity to be intentional about financial inclusion, and particularly counseling and coaching with the City of New York and the Office of People with Disabilities, as well as OFE, or Office of Financial Empowerment, to really begin the early stages of our relationship. And this call really helps us think through and learn from you all how we could, as a field, really prioritize the needs of people with disability from a financial empowerment standpoint, as well as get a lens as to where we've been and how we could move forward together in a way that is more aligned and in a way that is more inclusive. Next slide, please. And so Empowered Cities, as I shared, is a partnership between Citi Community Development, National Disability Institute, as well as municipal leaders to really engage in designing, testing, and delivering innovative and scalable solutions that aim to expand empowerment and inclusion of the disabilities community broadly. Next slide. And I want to turn it back over to Michael to talk a little bit more about Empowered NYC. Although this is a little bit of a thunder stealer for Martha, who I know is on the line. Michael, did you want to just highlight this so that Martha can continue with a bit more detail about how New York City is framing their work?
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine, and thank you for joining us. So yeah, really quickly, I'll just share a little bit of Empowered Cities. We're fortunate to have Martha Jackson with us today, who is with the City of New York Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, and she'll share a little bit more as we get into the panel discussion. But looking at empowered cities, to learn more about empowered cities, please go to our website, www.empoweredcities.org or .com, excuse me, to learn more. Empowered NYC is the first municipal program that is built on New York City's existing financial empowerment centers model and now offers specialized financial counseling and coaching designed and tailored to meet needs of households with disabilities. Empowered New York City is helping residents within New York City with disabilities and their families take control of their finances and become more financially stable. The Empowered NYC strategic partners include the City of New York, which is led by the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs, Office of Financial Empowerment, New York City's Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, and includes additional partners such as National Disability Institute, City Community Development, Poses Family Foundation, municipal offices. All right, so let's see here if I'm having some audio problem. Nope, we're good. An advisory board of municipal offices, service providers, and financial empowerment service providers. Sorry for that pause. It showed up on my screen that I was muted, so I think we're good to go. Next slide, please. So to continue our discussion, now that we've looked at what Empowered Cities is, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that and some of the work that is taking place throughout this webinar. But now let's take a look at the promise of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which this week we are celebrating the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the 29th anniversary. Next slide. So on July 26, 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed by President George H.W. Bush, and he said, "Together, we must remove the physical barriers we have created and the social barriers that we have accepted, for ours will never be a truly prosperous nation until all within it prosper." Next slide. So on this slide, we have an image of President George H.W. Bush signing the Americans with Disabilities Act into law. And in this image, from left to right, we have Evan Kemp, Reverend Harold Wilkes, President Bush, Sandra Perino, and Justin Dart Jr. Next slide. So the promise of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we feel that this is really important, and if you've been involved with NDI, you know that this is something that we share on a regular basis, because we think that this is really an important piece of the Americans with Disabilities Act to highlight. And it states that the promise of the Americans with Disabilities Act states, "The nation's proper goals regarding individuals with disabilities are to assure equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for such individuals." I would like to share that on this slide, there is an image of a painting by Dadu Shin that shows images of individuals moving forward with a woman and two kids holding hands, following behind with their image that's created by dots that gives the impression of being invisible. So thank you to our colleague, Nanette Goodman, for passing on this image to include. Next slide. So now that we know the promise of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the proper goals that were established under it, let's spend a few minutes to talk about the financial status of people with disabilities. So first off, who are people with disabilities? So we know that 40 to 57 million people identify as a person with disability. That's between 13 to 20% of the total population. 26% of households have a member with a disability. And the disability community, an important note here, the disability community is a diverse community. It's diverse in terms of the type of disability, race, age of onset of disability, and the socioeconomic situation of the individual. On this slide is an image by Liam Hassan Bazarkumo. Sorry for getting the last name wrong if I did. And this painting is a multicolored abstract painting that appears to have a larger image of a person's head and smaller images of people painted throughout the painting. Next slide, please. So now let's look at the impact of financial stress for people with disabilities. So we know that almost half of individuals skip medical treatment because of cost. We know that a third are late on mortgage payments. A third of individuals overdraw their checking accounts, and they're 3 times more likely to have extreme difficulty paying bills. On this slide is an image by Sherwin Long. It's titled Peace of Mind. This painting includes a person of color with puzzle pieces dropping from the face and a bird carrying one of the puzzle pieces. Next slide. So on this slide, we have an image or a chart, a graph that looks at unbanked, and titled Unbanked, the disability gap is growing. We know that the disability gap has increased for those who are unbanked. This graph shows that there was a slight decrease from 2011 to 2015 of those with disabilities unbanked. And as you can see by the chart, it's showing a slight increase in 2017 of increase of those unbanked, whereas for those with no disability, it continues to decrease. So this is an important piece for us to look at for individuals and really understanding the importance of educating individuals about the importance of being banked. So next slide, please. So with this information that was just shared, it is evident the need for financial empowerment. It's also evident, as it's stated in the Americans with Disabilities Act, as one of the proper goals, that economic self-sufficiency is a proper goal for individuals with disabilities. So when we look at the need for financial empowerment, we know that 26% of working age people with disabilities live in poverty, compared with 11% of those without disabilities. Disability is both a cause and a consequence of poverty. Poverty and disability reinforce each other. And one of the things that we look at also is people of color with a disability face an even harder economic reality than others. 37% of African Americans with disabilities live in poverty. 24% of non-Hispanic whites. We know that 29% of Latinos and 19% of Asian Americans. Historically, we know that individuals with disabilities have not had access to targeted financial capability strategies and have not had access to financial education or other financial empowerment services. Many individuals also face myths that limit their financial empowerment. And the myths oftentimes that limit their financial empowerment are the myths that if I'm receiving a public benefit, that I cannot increase my financial status. I cannot increase my financial status. Cannot increase my financial status due to the fear of losing my eligibility for my public benefit programs. Please visit the Empowered Cities website to learn more. You will find quick reference guides and briefs that highlight and provide more information on who people with disabilities are and their financial needs. So with that, as we shared this information, some background information on the Americans with Disabilities Act, the need for financial empowerment, I would now like to turn it over to our panel discussion, which will be moderated by our founder and executive director, Michael Morris of the National Disability Institute, to introduce our panel members and to moderate this discussion. Michael, I'll turn it over to you. Michael, are you with us?
Okay, now try.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes. Hi, Michael. Michael,
Okay.
welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thanks, Michael. And let me thank all the people across the country who've joined us today for this webinar. Let me introduce our panelists. First, Karen Tamley, Commissioner, Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, City of Chicago. Second panelist, Martha Jackson, Assistant Commissioner, Employment and Business Development, the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, City of New York. And our third panelist, Andy Arias, Policy Advisor, Office of Disability Employment Policy, ODEP, as many of us know it, at the U.S. Department of Labor. I will start with some questions for our panelists. You're also encouraged to use the chat box and submit questions as well, and we will try to take some of those also. So let's start. You know, this is, again, as it's been every year, a historic week across the country. People with disabilities, public agencies, employers, so many different communities embrace the signing into law of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so let me start with this question. We're 29 years out. Do you have a personal example you'd like to share of how individuals with disabilities have most benefited by what changes in their communities nationwide? And let me start with Martha. In New York City, what do you think of?
20 people, that's very exciting. When I think about what has benefited individuals most, I mean, I think there's a few things here in the city of New York. I also reached out to some of the folks in our office to get sort of a full response to this, and particularly awareness of people with various disabilities. Also, the need to change the physical environment so all individuals can participate fully. We also find more businesses are becoming accessible. Transportation is becoming more accessible, effective communication, and new technologies. And I guess the one thing that that sticks out here in our office, just to talk about technology for a moment, is that we actually created something called ASL Direct, or American Sign Language Direct, which is a video calling system put in place by the City of New York to provide an all-inclusive, accessible means to city services. So those who are deaf and hard of hearing can now contact our office to get information and resources that they need in American Sign Language in real time. And that, to me, is a really great example of how technology and awareness have come together and created opportunities for a community that's often left out of the thought process, making it easier for folks to achieve the information that they need in real time. The other, I think, would be we just came off the Disability Pride Parade, the 5th parade in New York City, with over 7,000 individuals with disabilities and their friends and families marching in pride and celebration. So I think awareness, technology, and the commitment to full access is really where we're coming. It's been 29 years, but it feels like the past few years have really, really made you know, the difference. So from our perspective, I think that's what I feel good to share.
Thank you, Martha. And again, Let's move from Martha to Karen Tamley, Commissioner, MOPD Office, City of Chicago. Karen, what for you might be a personal example you can share of changes that have happened in Chicago because of ADA?
Sure. Good afternoon. For me, it was really the opportunity to 29 years ago. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. There's a lot of feedback. Just having the opportunity 29 years ago to actually be on the White House lawn and watch the ADA being signed was significant for me. I was doing my first job out of college and working for a disability rights attorney who invited me to the ADA signing ceremony. And I think little did I know at the time how this law would affect my life. For me, I've seen significant changes in the built environment. Public transportation, the built environment, being able to be part of the community in ways that I never experienced growing up. And I think the ADA, more than the change we've been able to make in the physical world and the communications world, and really being a tool for people with disabilities, I think it's really created a mindset shift, changing attitudinal barriers, changing expectations, and really enabling people with disabilities to be seen as a constituency that deserves civil rights. In addition to really changing the mindset, I really have seen how it's changed the thinking about disability from the medical model, where we need to be cured or fixed, to the social model of disability, where it's society that puts up barriers, where we need to break those barriers down and to make our world accessible. And so I feel fortunate to be in a position working at the city where I can help make the ADA come alive in all aspects: transportation, building access, employment, education, and so many other areas.
Thank you, Karen. Let me turn to Andy. And how about for you? Personal example in your life changed by the passage of the ADA.
I feel very privileged that I grew up within the passage of the ADA. I didn't know what it was like before. So all the services and privileges that I was able to achieve in school and in employment, I sort of owe to the ADA. I think generationally, there's a difference now on how youth and young people, young adults with disabilities look at the ADA versus those advocates that we honor who passed the ADA. I feel like there's so much that we've gained through technology and through systems and through, online media platforms. Now, if there's an issue that we need to resolve with accessible barriers, Twitter goes off immediately. There's no longer the wait time or the lag time with having to engage so many other people with authority in order to get your messages heard. I think there's a more immediate response due to technology when it comes to the ADA. I feel like individuals with disabilities today have a greater opportunity to have their voices heard and to have equality be a state of mind, a reference beyond just what they deserve, but more like a culture. So they're growing up in an accessible culture. I would be remiss to say that we have miles to go before we're completely accessible in my city of DC, Maryland. But I've had the privilege of traveling all over the United States, really, and some other countries. And I know that we have done tremendous things in order to make accessibility a priority here in the United States. So I feel like the next 10, 15 years is just going to grow accessibility beyond our wildest dreams when it comes to the ADA.
Andy, let me turn to a different question. And listening to all three of you eloquently talk about changes in your lives, changes in your cities where you are, I am, brought back to the statement at the very beginning of the ADA about the proper goals for our country, which included not only equality of opportunity and full participation, but also to advance economic self-sufficiency for individuals with disabilities. What do you think, where are we with that? Why is that a key component of civil rights for people with disabilities? And with your work, what more can be done? Either your work in the mayor's office, Andy, you at a national level. Let me start with, again, Martha.
New York City, 79% of people with disabilities are jobless. And all I can say is that if that was any other population or community, the response to this would be outrage. So what can we do to make sure that New Yorkers with disabilities have access to everything, especially to economic self-sufficiency? And for us, if you have the ability to go to work and to make living wage, self-sustaining, family-sustaining wages, then you're part of the process. And, economic self-sufficiency really is the key, and how we address that is really going to be, I think, the changing agent for people with disabilities. And one of the most important ways we can address this is to have everyone be able to participate through equal access to employment. Here in the mayor's office in New York City, I was very fortunate to be in the position to create an employment initiative for people with disabilities with the support and engagement of our commissioner, Victor Calisi. So we actually are looking at self-sufficiency and employment and financial empowerment as a piece, focusing on making sure that people with disabilities have access to all kinds of opportunities, that they are prepared for the opportunities that they're interested in, they have the skills and the talent, and that as part of the work that we do here, we also make sure that they have access to information regarding financial empowerment through our Empowered NYC initiative. Because if we're able to help people become connected to careers and jobs and to help raise themselves out of poverty, again, 79% of New Yorkers with disabilities are jobless, and you know that that's going to translate into poverty. The only way is through employment and career and training and opportunity, and combine that with honest, consistent, relevant financial empowerment and education. And we're very proud that through the support of NDI, Office of Financial Empowerment, and City Community Development, we actually have created a rather robust program to help people get connected, not just to jobs and careers, but also access to financial sustainability, and education. And we've already seen in the short time that we've been able to do this, the impact that, that this combination has had. Happy to share stories, but basically, this is the reality. If we're able to combine employment and financial security, stability, and education, we see that this is the way forward for New Yorkers with disabilities.
Thank you, Martha. Let me turn to Karen, and you've had the opportunity and advantage of having worked for several mayors and heading up the Office for People with Disabilities. When you think about advancing economic self-sufficiency, what are some of the things that are coming into play in Chicago?
Yeah, I think certainly to echo what Martha said, the employment piece is huge. We have to do more to boost the employment rate of people with disabilities. And that has, on a policy front, been a big focus of our department. Not just addressing employment, but also looking at what are the root causes of the high unemployment. What are the different barriers that come into play when we talk about people with disabilities getting meaningfully employed? And some of those things that we are looking at is youth mentoring, youth employment readiness. We have a big program for high school students with disabilities to get job shadowing, to get resources, including financial resources, to do paid summer internships so that they could build their resume. And we as a community are building our pipeline. A few years ago, we launched a task force to look at literacy. That's proven to be a big issue in employment. We have a 43% achievement gap in reading here in Chicago that we established this task force to look at addressing. Because if you're graduating just even underperforming in reading, that has a cascading effect on your success in life, including your ability to be employed. This year, the mayor announced a report and recommendations that we just put forth to look at what can the city of Chicago do to move the needle forward on employment and economic opportunity. And so we developed a set of about 16 recommendations focused on how do we increase entrepreneurship, how do we look at greater outcomes for students in higher education, how do we better have job seekers, workforce agencies, and employers communicating better and getting the resources they need. And then lastly, how does the city of Chicago become a model employer for people with disabilities? So that's something we're looking at implementing over the course of the next few years. And then lastly, I think, of significance, NDI played a really important role in us establishing our Financial Inclusion Council called FACE, Financial Advisory Council for the Empowerment of People with Disabilities. And that is really a partnership between myself and the city treasurer to begin to move the needle on financial health, on financial empowerment. We're looking at things like better access to safe and affordable banking products, banking location, banking services that can be easily accessed by people with disabilities. And we have 17 federal, state, and local agencies, as well as the disability community and nonprofits, all working together towards the goal of improving financial health for people with disabilities in Chicago.
Fantastic. Let me go to Andy. And Andy, of course, you have a different lens. From the ODEP office at U.S. Department of Labor, but you also get an opportunity to travel back to California, your home state. What more do you think we can do to advance economic self-sufficiency and financial inclusion for people with disabilities?
So here at the Office of Disability Employment Policy, we realize that financial inclusion goes beyond just employment, right? So getting a job is one piece, and being employed is one piece, but being able to manage that income, being able to get past systemic barriers is truly, truly important. We are going to be releasing a Medicaid Brian brief that we worked on with ACL that is going to help individuals look at their health benefits in a different way, potentially to be able to increase their employment opportunities so that they can keep their health benefits while going into the workforce. We also focus quite a bit on ABLE and what's going on there on a national level, ABLE accounts, to see what opportunities or what pathways there might be for greater financial inclusion. I think when we look at someone's overall potential, if they have a disability, we have to look beyond the number, right? Like my previous panelist said, Karen, we have to look at the whole individual, right? We have to look at their family background. We have to look at their culture, see how they handle money within their family dynamic. They could be supporting more than just themselves. So we have to really bring that education into a deeper space and really have those broader conversations with not only the individual with a disability, but maybe with their family. We are also very focused on apprenticeships and how those opportunities might open doors for financial inclusion. So I think we have miles to go where individuals with disabilities are looked at part of the economy and taken more seriously than they have been in the past, so that they are able to buy a home and have not only an income or a living wage, but be able to thrive in our community.
I'm going to, this one is maybe a very short answer from each of you. I'll start with you, Andy, and that is, what communities do you believe are mobilizing with the disability community? So getting past just the identity of disability, what are groups coming together in terms of like different social movements are aligning? Do you see any unique mobilizing around disability in concert with some other key social justice groups or other groups defined by in another way?
So I think the disability community, I look at disability as a culture, right? So that's the one piece of everyone's life that disability will hit you, and so it's not something you can escape from. So I think that we do look at other communities like the LGBTQ community and other civil rights communities like African American, Hispanic communities, and see where we can braid, our advantages and sort of resources to learn and grow from those communities. I still think there's a lot of intersectional work to go. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we're just at the beginning of that process.
Thanks, Andy. And Karen, in Chicago, is there some crossover? You're working with a lot of groups with your efforts on economic inclusion. Is there crossover with the African American community or other groups in terms of recognizing a commonality of interest?
Absolutely, and I would say that is one of the benefits of the Financial Inclusion Council that we established, is that we really pulled together a diverse set of stakeholders that are working on this issue as well. So not just the disability community, but I think also a lot of organizations that are working on empowering low-income communities in general, which bring naturally together other constituencies. I think in the opening slides, you really began to talk about that intersect between disability and race and poverty, and how we have to be working together, really, on these challenges, because disability is a part of who all the other organizations and stakeholders end up serving. So for us, it's really been beneficial to not just work with the treasurer's office, both at the city and state level, and having them to understand disability in the community as a really important constituency, but also these more mainstream organizations, whether it's economic empowerment organizations, whether it's kind of financial services watchdog organizations and getting them to think about disability, you know, whether it's direct service organizations for individuals. I think it's really important that we're using our collective power to move this issue forward, and that's been really one of the benefits of
Thank you, Karen. And Martha, in New York City, are you seeing this crossover and different groups coming together, mobilizing around common interests?
Well, one of the sort of unique things that we found is actually the disability community itself has been very siloed. And so if you're a person who's legally blind, if you're a person who's deaf, hard of hearing, if you're a person with a physical disability, you know, that's kind of your lane, so to speak. But what has been happening, and I think it's really through our NYC at Work initiative here at the mayor's office, is actually being able to bring the community together. That's something that that rarely happens, but we've seen over the course of a few years that for the first time, there's a more inclusive disability community. The other kind of surprises, city agencies, New York City agencies that have, you know, historically not been involved, have really come to the forefront. And I think our office is uniquely poised in many ways to be able to bring the community together. But even the city agency responsible for diversity and inclusion in terms of hiring has really even taken the lead in making sure that through NYC at Work, people have access to city jobs. This is something that, you know, was really not on the forefront before. And then the business community for us has really become a great partner through our NYC at Work initiative. Having businesses at the table taking the lead in terms of where are the jobs and where's the talent, being able to have that supply and demand with businesses really wanting to be known for having open and respectful work environments. I think for us, this has been the change. The community itself, the city, and our business community coming together has really made a difference.
Let me go to a different kind of question, and that is, when the ADA was passed 29 years ago, I mean, obviously monumental, just incredible expectations about change from a civil rights perspective. People testified before Congress about being discriminated in the workplace, being discriminated in accessibility challenges, entering movie theaters, restaurants, all kinds of other environments. But fundamental to ADA as a civil right is this notion, as we talked about a few minutes ago, is fundamental civil rights must incorporate advancing economic opportunity and advancing economic self-sufficiency. Let me start with you, Martha. In terms of thinking about civil rights, how do we make the case to the many groups you work with and the many kinds of collaborators, how important economic empowerment is as a civil right, and how groups can work together in the public and private sector?
Economic self-sufficiency, it's crucial because It involves equal opportunity and inclusion. It involves economic self-sufficiency and personal satisfaction for folks with disabilities. If you don't have that, then how are you going to be able to fully participate? And so being able to have our partners on board with us to understand the importance of this, to know that this is the way for people to go from living, really in poverty in New York City, maybe living on $740 a month, imagine that, navigating your benefits in order to make the transition to the workforce, having to work part-time so you can just barely hold on to the benefits that you have. People need access to full-time employment, careers, and training. And the only way to be able to make a significant change in our city, I think, and anywhere, but certainly in a place like New York City, which is very expensive to live in, the way to lift people out of poverty is through employment and access to opportunity. And so having the business community take the lead on this for us has been crucial. I feel when you look at all of the other organizations and groups and communities, LGBTQ, the ones that Andy mentioned before, whenever business takes the lead and makes it a priority, this is when things start to change. And so having businesses at the forefront of this, I think, is the opportunity for all of us to kind of come together. And they understand it. Business understands it. Now they're finally taking the lead on this, making sure that people have access. And the other thing is that there are other interesting ways to address this issue, even in terms of some of the philanthropic organizations and funders, making sure that when they fund things, they make sure that whoever they're funding has access, these programs and services are accessible, that they include people with disabilities, that it is initially part of everything that they do. And when you start thinking about addressing the needs from the very beginning, that's when I think you're going to start seeing systematic change, especially in economic self-sufficiency.
To all three of you on this question. 20 years from now, we'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the signing of the ADA. Hard to project ourselves into the future that far when you think of how much the world has just changed in terms of technology, in terms of our just everything we do, from work to education, everything. What do you think, if we project forward to 50 years, the 50 years after signing the ADA, what do you think will be different for people with disabilities from how the world looks like today? And what do you think changed to make this happen? Let me go to you first, Andy.
Yes, thank you, Michael. I think one of the biggest components that we have to think about, and I think it'll happen in the next, 20 years, is the changing the perception of individuals with disabilities. I think that's a huge component because it encompasses employment, education, economic self-sufficiency. One of the greatest things I think will happen in the next 20 years is somebody with a significant disability will apply for a job, and it won't be like, oh, what reasonable accommodations you need to do this job. It'll just be a systematic way of doing things. So it's not a difference between this employee and that employee. They're on equal par. So I'm hopeful in the next 20 years that education and employment for individuals with disabilities is on an equal playing field for those without disabilities. I think we're getting there. I think one of the biggest components that plays a piece in this is the media. I think we emulate what we see on TV and on social media platforms, even in our subconsciousness. So we got to really think about how we're moving that needle forward in those many different avenues.
Thanks, Sandy. Let me turn to Karen. What do you think it looks like 50 years after the signing of the ADA?
Well, certainly I hope that we are going to make significant progress in the area of employment. As we all know, 29 years past the ADA, there's been so many changes I have seen just in my own lifetime as a person with a disability, but yet we haven't really cracked that and crack those employment numbers that we need to. And so I'm hopeful that this will be the issue when we look back 50 years from now, that we're going to say, hey, we did it. I think to your last question, when you talked about the civil rights case, particularly around financial empowerment, I think we're going to be moving more, and we're starting to already see this as moving towards the business case of employment of people with disabilities. And I'm seeing that more and more now about not just hiring people with disabilities is the right thing to do, but actually, there's studies that have come out even recently. I can quote the Accenture AAPD Disability In study that talked about how companies that had disability inclusion practices and were hiring people with disabilities had 28% higher revenue, double the net income, 30% higher economic profit margin than their peers. And then it also showed that the US GDP could get a boost of up to $25 billion if more people with disabilities join the labor force. So, I'd like to be seeing this business case be something that's going to really propel us forward on economic empowerment of people with disabilities.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Martha, your thoughts. Can you project forward 50 years out?
Thinking about all the young people that are in school now, and my secret wish is at some point disability rights will be part of civil rights that are taught in schools, and so that there's a working knowledge and an understanding of disability rights and how far we have come. And I think about the young people and how that's our future and how we have to be able to connect with them, making sure that they, as Andy said, if you grew up with the ADA, you kind of take it for granted. But my hope is that because young people are used to technology, used to hanging around with people who think and look differently, that this will really be projected into our society, and my job won't be necessary. So I'm optimistic that employment and access and diversity and inclusion have been addressed in respectful and thoughtful ways and are no longer sort of standalone initiatives, but that we're really looking at an integrated education and workforce, because diversity of thought, ability to do things differently is really what makes our country great, and making sure that people with disabilities are included is crucial, I think, to the ongoing success of our country.
Thank you, Martha. And let me close there, and I'm going to turn it back to Michael with some further highlights of materials and resources want you to be aware of. But Karen, Martha, Andy, thank you for your insights. Thank you for your perspective. I think you have laid out a wonderful vision as we look ahead and continue to advance economic opportunity and full participation and full civil right protections for people with disabilities. So Michael, let me turn it back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. So just really quickly as we close out here, just want to remind you to please go to empoweredcities.com. There's a variety of free materials that are available for municipalities and community partners that you can access. And some of the items that are available are topics that we talked about today, about the financial needs of people with disabilities, defining disability, and so forth. So please check out our website. Next slide, please. Also, if you're in the New York City area, please note, as we talked about Empowered New York City, counselors are available to provide financial counseling to New York City residents. If you want to make a referral or schedule an appointment, again, if you're in the New York City area, use the following link, nyc.gov/empowerednyc. Next slide. I'd like to say a special thank you again to City Community Development and to Jasmine and her colleagues for their support of the Empowered Cities Initiative. Thank you again to our panelists, Commissioner Karen Tamley, Assistant Commissioner Martha Jackson, Policy Advisor Andy Arias, and also thank you to Michael Morris for joining us today. Special thanks to the Empowered Cities team as well as the NDI team for their assistance with this. Finally, thank you to each of you for spending the afternoon with us and continuing to see that the promise of the Americans with Disabilities Act moves forward. If you would like to learn more about Empowered Cities or need any technical assistance, please feel free to reach out to us at one of the email addresses that are on the website. Also, please remember at the close of this webinar, you will receive a survey, a post-webinar survey. Please take a few minutes to complete it and also take some time to let us know of future topics that you would like to learn more about. So with that, thank you again for joining us today, and thank you for joining us in celebrating the 29th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Have a great afternoon, everyone.